Hello, everyone, and welcome to our week 13 content. Now, we're going to continue our discussion on leadership today. To begin with, I want to recap on an activity that I'd like you to engage in. And I'd like you to answer this question. What are the top 5 qualities of a good leader? To answer this question, you can go to menti.com and enter this following code. Some of you have already done this. Now, as you enter this in, we'll get a word cloud. And I want to show you what that looks like. So for those who have entered in their answers already, here's what we have so far. And confident looks like is the number 1. So if you're not familiar with how a word cloud works, the more people who put in the same word, the larger that word gets in the word cloud. So confident is clearly the most commonly entered quality of a good leader that you all have entered so far. So if you haven't participated in this yet, go ahead and participate. If you'd like to enter answers again, go ahead. The more people who enter in, the better our word cloud will get. All right, now we're going to talk about styles of leadership. There are a lot of styles of leadership out there, and generally leadership will fall into 2 basic categories. Those categories are transactional and transformational. So I want you to think for a minute, what is the difference between transactional leadership and transformational leadership? Transactional leadership is centered on the management process that involves controlling, organizing, and short-term planning. So it's based upon really short-term planning, getting short-term goals, and we're talking about daily goals, weekly goals, maybe monthly goals, but that would be about the extent of it. And transactional leadership would be focused on the work that needs to get done. So this is what we have to get done today. We have to produce 3,000 parts, or by the end of the week, we need to get all our financial reports out, or we need to deliver on our marketing materials to client A. So that is where transactional leadership comes into play. And every organization is going to have some element of transactional leadership in it. But what we're going to discuss would be an organization that is operating on a pure transactional leadership style and no other style. To be fair, most leaders employ a mix of methods and styles. Most organizations have a mix of styles, and leadership style requirements can even vary from one department to another. For example, an accounting department would be very much transaction based. You have to do the accounting work. You have to get your reports out. You have to deliver reports to the client. That is your product that you're delivering, and it needs to be on time. But there is also the side of employee engagement, and transactional leadership may not work as well with that. So you may need to bring in some transformational style. So a marketing department within the same organization may be purely and entirely a transformational style of leadership. And like I said, there's many others. I've identified so far as many as 26 that have minimal overlap. but there's many more than that out there. So there's no just one leadership style that works. So let's talk about some elements of transactional leadership. Transactional leadership involves extrinsic motivation. So in other words, external motivations. Most often this will come in the form of bonuses, work incentives, financial incentives. Maybe it's additional time off. Maybe it's gift cards to your favorite coffee shop. Maybe it's movie tickets. So anything that appeals to a person in an external manner like that would be considered extrinsic motivation. Practicality. Transactional leadership tends to be very practical, very practicality based. So this is what we need to get done. This is how we need to motivate people. We do it, we get our deliverables out. Transactional leadership is usually very resistant to change because there are set rules, there are set policies, there's a set way of doing things. This is the way we do it. We don't change, we don't adapt. It can discourage independent thinking. So because things are so set in the way they are supposed to be done, independent thinking is more difficult to come by in this type of an environment. Now, it rewards your performance. And I will say that it rewards or punishes performance because good performance is rewarded in some extrinsic means, but bad performance is punished. Maybe you don't get as many hours. Maybe you get started down the progressive discipline path. It tends to result in constrained thinking. I should say constrained. That's misspelled. It is a passive leadership style. It deals with directives and has a heavy emphasis on corporate culture and self-interest. So what do they say are some of the advantages of transactional leadership? They say employee motivation. Now, this is true if you are motivated by bonuses, if you're motivated by more money, if you're motivated by the rewards. And this doesn't take into account the human need for a sense of purpose and the fact that we are all meaning-making creatures. So whether you completely agree with this assessment or not, I am giving you what the advocates of transactional leadership say are its advantages. So it's based on reward and punishment. It's good at motivating employees to become productive, but it's kind of a be productive, motivate you by force kind of thing. Excuse me. So incentives weight employees who perform well. It serves as a reminder that management is watching you. They're watching your performance and they expect the maximum productivity from all employees. And mistakes and underperformance result in punishment. So that would be the opposite of motivation. Although advocates of this method believe that the punishment motivates employees to change and become better. That in reality is not always the case. More advantages, you have short-term achievable goals. And this tends to be true with this style because it is designed to achieve short-term goals. You need a shorter timetable. They're easier to achieve your goals and less demoralizing for employees. Well, maybe not. It depends. If all your employees are motivated by extrinsic factors, then yes. But if you have some that are motivated by intrinsic factors, then this type of environment could be very demoralizing. So motivation and self-confidence. Some autonomy is given from constraint, from constant direct supervision. But autonomy, especially in a modern sense, is not just doing what you're told without supervision, but it's the freedom to think and create and develop new ways and better ways of doing things, which this system tends to not be open to. More advantages include a clear structure. Yes. Employees are informed beforehand what to expect, given very concise instructions, and they're expected to follow the chain of command. So many organizations now today have a open door policy where it doesn't matter if you skip one level of the organizational hierarchy, you can go to that person and talk if you feel that's the appropriate thing to do without fear of retribution or punishment. Now, you should still be respectful of the chain of command, but it's not a requirement. However, under a transactional leadership style, you must follow the chain of command. Daily objectives are rewarded or punished if they're missed. It can increase productivity. It can reduce costs. It is pretty good at doing that. Short-term goals make it easy for employees to get things done. Now, this is true with employees with lower levels of mental complexity. Higher levels of mental complexity would probably be extremely bored in this type of environment. Extrinsic motivators provide incentive to complete the tasks. Well, this is true. But let's look at some disadvantages. Leadership tends to be unyielding, unflexible. You have a clear structure, but the policies and rules can't be changed. So that makes it very hard to work under a system like that. Every employee must work under rigid, strict rules. Disagreement with management can be punished, sometimes severely, meaning they could fire you for disagreeing with management, for offering an alternative way of doing things. Leaders find it difficult to adjust to changing situations. And as we've discussed before, we live in a very volatile, always changing world and business environment. So the transactional leadership will have a hard time dealing in that VUCA world. Creativity is very limited. So it does not encourage creativity because strict rules leave little room for creativity. And it's extremely difficult to make any changes. Employees are not developed. So lower level employees are not developed to step into higher levels because the expectation is this is your job, do it for as long as you're here. The consequence of that is if a leader steps away from the company for whatever reason, nobody's been prepared to step up into that leadership position, which means the company has to go outside and find someone, which means the onboarding takes longer, getting them acclimated to the new role and the company culture takes longer, and it makes it more expensive in the long term. Employees are extremely accountable. They have to follow strict rules and policies, and they're always being watched to make sure that they do. If something goes wrong, the employee is the first one blamed, not leadership. Employees under this type of leadership tend to be very unhappy. And they don't feel they're part of the team, not part of the organization. They're just cogs in the wheel. They're just part of the machine that has to get things out, but nobody really cares about them or their input or who they are as a person. Transactional leaders tend to be insensitive. They don't consider how their actions might affect others, which means they have very low self-awareness. And their relationship with their team is very surface level. There's really nothing beyond the work relationship. So unfortunately, transactional leadership is still very popular in the workplace, but it has many, many critics, and you can see why. There are better styles of leadership than transactional leadership, and there's actually very few environments where pure transactional leadership works. Like I said, there may be instances where transactional leadership is appropriate as part of the leadership mix, but in general, a pure transactional leadership style does not work very well in today's world. So who are some famous transactional leaders. Top of our list is Bill Gates. Bill Gates was a very transactional leader. He may have had people in his organization that were more transformational, but he himself was an extremely transactional leader. And you can see that in the way he approaches things today. Norman Schwarzkopf. So I don't know if you all know who this is. Many of you did not, but he was the general during the first Iran war that we fought to drive Saddam Hussein back from, I believe it was Kuwait. And we can see how in the military, transactional leadership would be necessary and effective, because if you're in the military, you get your orders, you follow them. You don't question them, you don't ask to change them in general, but you do what you're told. If you have a problem with it, you can deal with that problem later, but first you accomplish the mission. Vince Lombardi, who was a famous football coach, I believe it was football, and Howard Schultz, who was the CEO of Starbucks for a long time. Actually, he did it twice. Left, came back. Not sure if he's still there or not. Now we're going to move to transformational leadership. And one of the key elements of transformational leadership is that transformational leaders guide followers through inspiration by motivating them. And it relies very heavily on the leader's charisma. So you need a leader who's dynamic, who's likable, who's friendly, and who has the ability to quickly gain the loyalty of the team. Now, there are four main components that comprise transformational leadership. The first is individualized consideration, meaning the leader considers you as an individual, as a person, and leads you as an individual, as a person on their team. Means they make an effort to get to know you as a person, get to know some personal things about you. The next thing is inspirational motivation. So their style of motivating their team is to inspire you with vision, with their charisma, with a sense of purpose, with a sense of working towards something bigger than all of us combined. Next is idealized influence. So people tend to idealize their transformational leader. Oh, he's a great guy. Oh, she's a great leader. I just love this person and their personality and the way they care about us and the way they lead us. And intellectual stimulation, which goes to employee development. So they're always stimulating you intellectually, always stimulating you to grow and develop and become more than you are. Now, I want to stop for a minute. If you're watching this video, either in the student portal or on YouTube, put a comment below and tell me which of these four would be most important to you. Individualized consideration, inspirational motivation, idealized influence, or intellectual stimulation. All right, so let's work on recapping. Transactional leadership, it focuses on deviation management and corrective action. So basically, it's management by exception is what it's known as. That means I will, as your transactional leader, I'll pretty much leave you alone, except for giving you directions. But other than that, I'll leave you alone until you make a mistake, until you break a rule or break a policy. Then I'm going to step in and tell you how you messed up and tell you how you have to fix it. So that's management by exception. Let things operate until something breaks. Transformational leaders, on the other hand, they're positive role models, regardless of the hierarchy. Now, between these two, transformational leadership tends to increase financial performance better than transactional leadership. Because, why would that be? Why would transformational leaders tend to increase financial performance better than transactional leaders? Leave a comment below and tell me. The reason is, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you tell me in the comments below. So what are some weaknesses of transformational leadership? Some complain that transformational leadership it's too static. It oversimplifies corporate life, that it takes far too simplified approach to leadership, that if I'm just your friend and keep you in a good mood and keep you happy, you're going to perform. And there's some truth to that. But the critics say a good leadership model needs even more. A big weakness is that the transformational leadership is on the great leader, on the personality of the leader themselves. And if that leader goes, then everything kind of falls apart. We've discussed before that if you have a team of 5 and you take one person away from that team or add an extra person in, making them a team of 6, you don't have the same team anymore. You have a new team and you have to figure out the new dynamics. Well, on a team led by a transformational leader, because everything's centered on that leader, probably to an unhealthy degree. When that leader goes, it's not just that you have a new team, but the whole purpose and motivation and sense of meaning that that team had is gone. And it basically has to figure everything out and build itself up from the ground up, which can be very stressful on the team. Now, the transformational leadership model, as it says here, has come under fire. It's come under criticism for being a flawed model. A lot of the definitions and a lot of the building blocks are vague. They're not clear. They're not concise. So among research, especially, who tend to favor concise definitions, concise research results, the criticism is that transformational leadership's building blocks are way too vague. And we don't really have any tools to effectively measure the effects of transformational leadership. I mean, you can look at performance. Is performance better? Yes. But then you have to take the transformational leader away. Was it better when they were there? Yes or no? Then when they're gone? Was it due to their leadership style? Was it due to something else? It's very difficult to measure it with the current way that the style is put together. But at any rate, we've looked at transformational leadership. We've looked at transactional leadership. So now you get to decide what leadership style is best. Leave me a comment below. Tell me what leadership style you think is better and why. And I'll give you my feedback once I hear from you. All right, that's it for week 13. Looking forward to seeing you all this coming week through Zoom. Have a great week. God bless.